Well, here's one's going to be fun. This person asked, please do a video on Van Gogh's technique. That one I bet you hadn't even thought of. Well, Van Gogh or Van Gogh, the linguists say that both are acceptable. We're in America, and sometimes we pronounce things according to how our language works. We won't go there. But anyway, one thing that we don't realize, we fail to remember about artist techniques is that there's such a thing as universal techniques. That means certain things that we know about, that certain effects we know we will get, certain ways we move the brush and pick up paint and those kinds of things. And I've done a lot of that throughout our quick tips. But once that's learned, an artist temperament will control how that goes. And a lot of times we don't realize that much of what we see in a painting comes from the artist's temperament. Something we don't realize, though, is that behind all that technique, there's this kind of a mysterious thing that's going on according to the natural temperament of the artist. So when you're trying to study a person's technique, don't try to copy it because you're not that person. You're you. But if you just want to learn how they're doing what they're doing, then here's what I'm going to show you. Now, when we look at Van Gogh's brush strokes, and if you ever have an opportunity to see his work alive instead of just seeing photos of it, by all means do, and go as close as they'll allow you to, and look at those brush strokes and look at what's happening. And this is a close-up. This is one of the familiar sunflower paintings of many he did. And this is a close-up of this part right here. And I chose that because you can really see there what's happening with each individual brush stroke. You can see that he has double loaded, and he did that an awful lot, double loaded a brush. And we can see those double loaded strokes. You can see how the green's blending into the yellow as it moves right around like that. You can also see the energy. You can see that sometimes the strokes are done very quickly, like this, for example, and this, for example, this, and this. And you know that we know about Van Gogh's temperament, that he was, well, I think today he might have been bipolar. And if he were more in a manic mode of bipolar, he would be moving very, very fast. If he were in a more depressed mood, he'd be moving a little slower. So sometimes the paintings will tell us that, and sometimes they won't. So see all those things that go into it? Well, that's one thing. So now something else that we fail to take into consideration is what's going on the artist's palette. So I have found some photos here of Van Gogh's palette, and I want to show you that this palette was actually, this is how the palette looked after one of his paintings. And we don't have many photographs of artist's palette. Some we do. Some we're lucky enough to get photographs of, not just how the palette is arranged, but how does the palette look once the painting is finished. It tells you a lot about the artist's work. You can see all this energetic stuff going on in here where he's just pulled his brush right through those colors to load it. You can see that double load right there. You can see it in other places too. And I did a close-up for you so that you can get even a better view of that. I'll just take that away. There we go. There's a close-up. See how all this stuff, and you can see these colors are arranged according to what he needed. It's not a chaotic palette. It may appear chaotic to you when you first see it, but then when you start examining it, you realize that you can see where he's working different areas. And if you can see the palette along with the painting, I think he was working on a portrait with this one. But you can see how you can see the colors in here that you actually see in the painting. So I've sort of done a little bit of a, you might call it imitation of Van Gogh's palette here. I thought I would do just a little bit to show you how I perceive this one's here. How I perceive Van Gogh might have painted this sunflower. Not the whole thing, just a portion, just to show you something of how to study an artist's work. If you're studying an artist's technique, then you need to get down to the nitty-gritty of what the artist is doing with brush strokes and color, composition, all those things. But we're just going to focus. So you see, you've never seen my palette look like that before because I use a totally different method. But I've tried to create a palette that is as close to the pattern of Van Gogh's palette. If we turn it this way, you can kind of see. I've tried to create a palette that's closer to the pattern of Van Gogh's palette as I could, and taking into consideration what colors might be used there. So, and this may be a fun thing for you to just try. If you're interested in how Van Gogh painted, this is something you might try. Now, just assuming I'm just going to do a little bit of something, and I'm not even sure that I have studied his work enough to know sort of how he would plan a composition, but I think perhaps he would place an image something like this, very gesturally. You see, it's just a very gestural placement, and if he was interested in the stuff going down here, he would have done that too, and maybe rearrange, have the tilt on the canvas the way he felt the tilt of the stem, the way he felt that. And you can see in his paintings, even in the photographs of the paintings, that sort of thing is very obvious. So then I don't really know if he started dark or just started with the image. But here's what I'm going to do. Just sort of, well, I think what I'll do is I'm going to put on the, just bend this here and get it so I can see. I'm just going to put this part right here, right there like that. And then we put some magnets on there so that hold it in place. Whoops. There we go. Sort of like that. Maybe that'll stay. I'm just sort of going to look at this as I'm showing you sort of how I could imagine Van Gogh might have gone at this. Now, what I imagine he might have done, he might have started something with what we see right in here is that the very dark little center of the flower there, and he might have done something like that. He would have done it very fast, sort of like this, and he just might have done something like this and something like this. And I'm not going to try to explain colors on that sort of thing as we go. We're just looking at the movement. Now, and stuff, all the green stuff like that, that's where you might see right in here. Of course, this is much lighter and whatever. So what he might have done there, you see I picked up some dark green in the brush, and now I'm going to just drag the brush like I think he did. He sort of would drag his brush through like that. And we can see that in the palette, how when he would load the brush, he was actually dragging the brush like that, and his brush would be loaded with thick, thick paint. And then he might have just stroked something like that. And you can begin to see the double load. You see how the double load of the colors works right there, and you might have just sort of done something like that, and maybe something like this. And I'm going to do some more double load and pulling it through that green, and pull it through that yellow, and just try to pull it the same way as I see on his palette. He would have pulled that stroke, and might go something like this, and maybe do something like that. Another thing, may even put some of that in there like that. And I'm not even sure he cleaned his brush after he stroked. I can't imagine that he might have. And so I'm just going to take what's in the brush there and reach into that yellow and begin to stroke that yellow in. So the yellow would get stroked in something like that, and you can begin to see something that kind of looks Van Goghish. I'm not claiming to be like Van Gogh. Remember I said I'm not Van Gogh. I don't have his temperament. And so uh, I just can kind of estimate what was going on. Now, I imagine that Van Gogh might have pulled the paint out of his brush sort of like that, but I don't know that he would have actually done much cleaning of the brush. That people who probably studied more of maybe what he wrote to his brother Theo might know that sort of thing. All right, so now you can begin to get the dark portions of those yellows in again like that, sort of like that. Now I'll go to a tube of yellow here and squeeze out some more, and I can imagine that when he would, see if I see any evidence. Yeah, I see a little bit of evidence of what he might have done. He might have right in here, in order to get the oranges, etc. He might have just squeezed out some yellow right in there, and he would probably not have cared how that pile looked. And now pull the paint out. Now let's get some real yellow, and let's hit it into that red just a little bit. And let's go. I'm gonna do a little double loading there. Can you see I've got some red on top of that yellow? So just sort of stroke that in, and stroke, 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 stroke. All right, we'll stroke, stroke, stroke. Pull that red out, and we can see sort of stroke, stroke, and probably something like that. And see how all this is stroking upward right there for that bud? Well, I've got some upward things going on there, so sort of something like this. You see the double load coming? Pick up a little yellow and add just a tiny bit of that red. See how that paint's piled on the brush there? And it's beginning to look a little Van Goghish, just a little Van Goghish. Fill in some spaces there. Now, as when I studied the strokes of the background of his, I'm looking right here. When I look at those, some museums and galleries have the ability on their websites for you to zoom in. And you can zoom in, you can see the brush strokes a lot clearer if you find those. Usually the larger museums will have those, especially museums that have collections. Especially try the National Museum of London and also our National Museum often have that ability for you to zoom in so that you can really see those brush strokes. So I'll do just a little bit more here, and then I'll show you something of how I perceive he might have done the background. I think I may have just a little bit too much of that red in there, but just give you an idea of what get a lot of push-pull going on here. Push it and pull it. Just give you an idea there. Now, when he was doing the background, back to that, I looked at it very, very closely, and some of them you can see the brush strokes. I think most likely the way I see the background placed in there, that he would do the image first and build the background around it. And so what I'll do there is I'll just do sort of like how he would have done, pull a hunk of paint down like that, and I'm going to try to go for kind of maybe this color of background. Just put this right here and start building a new color area, sort of like he would have done. Now, I had enough in that brush, I probably can get that. So I can see sort of how he would do that. Sort of move that brush in and just pull it out. And let's do this right this. Kind of maybe move that brush in there, pull it out. And what I can see he's doing there, he's being careful not to make too much of an echo, meaning the background reflecting the background stroke reflecting the same shape as the image itself. I can see he was trying to avoid that. Let's get a little bit more blue in that. Get that a little cooler. I better I know this is how he loaded, but also he did that. I can see how he did this sort of thing sometimes. So, all right, that got too light, and he's probably just got himself a pile of paint there, and he was going for it. It's just going to do what he would have done, perhaps. Remember though, don't say that I'm trying to imitate Van Gogh. I'm not. I'm just uh, sort of trying to perceive how he moved about when he did this stuff, how he loaded his brush, but I'm not trying to imitate his method. I'm just showing you probably something of the kind of motions he would make, movements ways he would move that brush just by what I see down there, by the way he would move that brush in order to create a painting. Of course, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just wanted to show you something of how to study an artist. If you can find a picture of their palette, study the movement of the palette, study how the colors are arranged on the palette, and how the brush is being dragged through the paint. You can see evidence of that. It's like tire tracks in snow. You can see the evidence of that on the palette itself. So I won't take this any much further. I'm sort of having fun with it and wanting to take it a little bit further, but I don't want the quick tip to be too long. So I think that's probably enough for you to see in order to get an idea of maybe some way that Van Gogh's speed of the brush and the loading of the brush and how he used the palette, how he arranged his colors on the palette, something of that. But here's what I would suggest for you. If you can zoom into a section of a painting, if you want to study how an artist, the technique, this is technique now. If you want to study the technique of the artist, zoom in on a section and then practice. Now, I didn't do this part, but I talked about it. See if you can make your brush and the way you load it do the same thing that this is doing. Just by looking at the colors that were in the brush, for example, you can see right here, if we can zoom into there, we got this background color right here. And let's see, we don't see, on the palette. No, we wouldn't see it on that palette because that was a palette was for a different painting. But we can see that background color right there. And you can see how he's got the background color plus the green loaded on the brush. And it would be something like this, that background color. Say if this was the background color, I already got that in the brush like that. And then in order to do a stroke like that, he would have pulled it through this color right here. That's double loaded. You see that? And then when you make that stroke, this is what you get. Just quickly make the stroke. Van Gogh's technique, you don't see him painting over and over and stroking over and over again. You just see his strokes moving and going to the next stroke, moving and going to the next stroke, moving and going to the next stroke. So what I advise is that you practice first off just a tiny section. Don't try to do a painting of the whole thing if you're studying technique. Try to do just a tiny section where you try to figure that stuff out, how the palette is working, how the brush is working, how the motion or the movement or the speed with which the brush is working, and then go to another subject. This is where you really know if you have got the hang of what the artist is doing. Go to a subject different from this subject, but something that's maybe the same kind of thing. Like I chose the idea of sunflower, although we're looking at this part of kind of a little bud of sunflower for our study. But that's the way to learn it, is to study up close just a tiny section to kind of figure what the artist is doing, then go to a different subject rather than try to copy the artist's subject. Go to a different subject, maybe of the same kind, and then see if you can replicate, not imitate, but replicate some of that. But keep in mind, you're not that artist. Your temperament is not that artist temperament. It may be similar, but it's not that artist temperament. So, but the thing is, regardless of who you're studying, what artist you're studying, if you relate to what that artist is doing, what you've discovered the artist is doing, if you relate to the technique, it tells you something about the technique that you might use for your painting. kind of using the technique. Artists do that. It's called, we say it's legitimate stealing, but musicians do it. All the arts do that. It is the way the art is passed down, is through techniques, not imitation, but learning the techniques and getting a feel for what the technique can do the way that artist used it.
Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to dyingminds.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.